Good morning from Pennsylvania. It's 15 degrees outside, and I would know it best because I just finished shoveling the driveway. So I wanted to give everybody an update on global empires. Probably the most significant you can see in front of you is the fact that we have selected a date period for it because we believe that 19XX was just a little too ethereal, and we wanted to get as close as possible to World War I's beginning, making it more historical, at least to the units and the setup, but providing a date range, and as you can tell, long enough, over 8 years, that would provide for the technological development, the conclusion of the Balkan Wars, the tension, the lack of a Congress of Europe in order to resolve disputes, all kind of leads to this clash of empires. And so the majority of work that I've done with my team over the last couple of weeks has been to refine the objectives, and I've also worked with Doug at Historical Board Gaming to do some work on the player aids and other items. As I will scan across, you can see the many of you will recognize a conglomeration of both the 1914 and 1918 setup charts. A little busy because you have two stages for infantry development. You have your early infantry, colonial, mountain, and of course we got additional units like engineers and motorcycles and self-propelled anti-air. Those are not included in Global 14 and Global 36, but they are in this game with special operations. And what you have is an advancement. So we see these units move into the next category or evolve, and then you can continue to move left to right and see armored cars, light armor, and yet here's early armor, as well as, you know, our advanced units. Moving further to the right, you see dreadnoughts in the same C category, of course, as battleships and heavy battleships. So pretty awesome opportunity. This game in front of you, we decided to play test a 3-player game because that puts 2 of the empires up for grabs. If those of you who followed along, those are our non-aligned major powers. And then of course we have still our 4 minor powers that are available to be aligned. So the objectives have been updated. There are still 3 national objectives that each nation will have one of that they choose to go after. And then there are 12 random objectives. Now the 12 random objectives, we took the opportunity away for the 4 minor playable powers: Italy, Austria, Ottomans, and Japan. They cannot pursue those big random objectives that kind of help balance the point capability between the nations. China remains China. We haven't changed anything here, with the exception the warlords. The warlord objective is to retain 1 of each warlord on the map, and so it will really behoove the nations to interfere in things in China, but at the same time China cannot be aligned. So whether you're supporting the warlords or you're supporting the nationalists, or you're trying to just balance them out so that neither comes victorious, which actually is something that the US and other major powers would be interested in, is not having a unification and not having overly victorious warlords. And so a consideration for each nation will be, how do we interfere in China's internal politics while, and potentially for some that may mean invading. So we're going to move further over and look specifically at the IPP chart. Hasn't changed much. tech chart. We did split in engineering and industrialization technology. We thought that having them combined into one technology was too powerful, so we split them into two. So some other adjustments, if you look over at the diplomacy chart, we have nations, still minor powers that can be aligned, but they cost twice as much as a regular minor power. So all of the small roundels representing the minor powers that come with the game as part of the diplomacy chart. The larger roundels of Italy and Ottomans, Japan, Austria are the minor powers that can be aligned. They cost 2 IPP to attempt to align them. And then the major powers that are not players in this game, in this test, are Russia and France. If you remember from previous updates, nations can only align one of those through diplomatic action. The United States has been successful in aligning France, and Germany is working on aligning Russia. As you can tell, they haven't been very successful yet. So those are some of the updates. This game has progressed along. We've taken 8 turns, about to start the 9th, and if you remember, this portion of the IPP chart is where you can mark who's at war with whom. As you can tell, there aren't very many nations at war with each other yet, just based on their objectives. Some of them are either building their position up before they launch an attack, or maybe attempting to accomplish their objectives in other means, for example, through diplomacy. Let me give you some examples of what I mean by that, just in a recap of this game. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is a 3-player game. Germany as a empire, Britain, and the US. 3 most powerful nations on the board. So a 3-player game, it's recommended that you play those 3. We did write some flexibility in the rules, allowing for players, if they would agree, they could play 3 completely different nations. But that's your recommendation for a 3-player game. So at the start of this, the German Empire and British actually had very poor rolls. The first 4 turns are prequel. They had their poor rolls were in the nature of increasing from peacetime to wartime income. So they struggled for the first few turns, rolling 1s and 2s. But the German Empire eventually did get to wartime income first, and their objective includes taking Bohemia and Austria, as well as multiple other nations, kind of expanding their empire locally there in Europe. As you can tell, they did launch an attack against Austria. Now, Austria starts in a position of advantage for France, but at the time, France was not a player, had not been brought into an alliance with the United States. So Austria immediately aligned with the nearest nation that was at war, and that was the British Empire. So Austria is being supported by the British, being played by the British player. They are at war with Germany, which you saw marked on the map, but the British are not. That's a choice that Britain and Germany have to make. And Germany has decided not to attack Britain, at least not yet, while Austria, but Britain and the United States have been lend-leasing to the Austrians to help bolster their defense. So the United States does not have to be at war, although they are, and they are supporting the Austrians in their defense against the Germans. As stated earlier, the British have not gone to war. Their objective in this game includes taking as many islands with either an IPP value or a port. And they start off in a pretty good advantage, but they still have a lot to do. And so Germany's attack against Denmark worked in the favor of the British, because that nation also normally aligns to France, but in this case they did not. And so there are some islands that when Denmark was attacked became British, so that actually worked in the British favor, as well as Britain aligned Greece through diplomatic means. And if they are successful in aligning countries like Portugal, they will obtain some additional islands and with either an IPP value or a minor port. So that's going to work in their favor. They actually wouldn't need to go to war, although it is likely that that would occur. So that's Britain and the German Empire. The French were just aligned by the United States. So they are positioning themselves, potentially looking at a German incursion, a large German incursion that's being built up in Bavaria. It would make sense for the Germans to attempt to capture the French capital of Paris, adding additional victory points to themselves. The United States of America objectives involve taking islands across the Pacific, and they've started by taking Penape and the Marshall Islands from the Germans. Their objective also includes taking the Japanese islands and the remainder of the German islands. So they've made a large advancement on doing that pretty early in the game. So that is why they chose to go to war with Germany. They have not declared war against Japan because it's not necessarily time for that yet. But in order to achieve their objective, they're going to have to take these islands from the Japanese, and that's going to pit them at war. And the Japanese will align with Britain because the Japanese roundel is in the British spear. Also has caused the British to start building up their capabilities, as you can see down here with the Anzacs, and placing additional colonial infantry in locations that they can. So that's how the three empires are working on obtaining their objectives. And just as a reminder for those of you, as I wrap this up, this game is a conglomeration of the Global 14 and Global 36 rules. The vast majority of the rules that we've written center either around the objectives or they center around the units and building the bridge between Global 14 and Global 36 as you transition your infantry from kind of the early infantry into later generation of infantry or armor or your naval assets or air and so on. And so I think the fun part about this is just going to be able to see technology is going to be king. I believe Tim and I made that point in previous videos. You got to advance in technology if you're going to be competitive, and diplomacy can increase the size of your alliance, and that's where players are going to have to focus their time and their energy if they want to be the nation that comes out on top. We've done a few other things with the rules, but I don't want to give it all away, plus this video has gone too long. So hopefully you appreciate that update. We have a group coming in February to play a 5-person game, and I believe that'll be the final proof of the rules and concepts I doubt we have many changes that come out of that weekend, and if they do, there'll be minor clarifications to what we've already created. The rule set's still at 36 pages, which is, as I stated earlier, it's primarily in the bridging and understanding of the differences between Global 14 and Global 36. So hopefully you're looking forward to this release. I am. I think it's just going to be fun for the community, especially for those who already own both sets of games. It's just going to provide you another opportunity and more of a dynamic environment for your playable nations. Well, enjoy, and enjoy this winter time indoors at your table.